All right. We're back for another episode of the Bad Ideas podcast with Krishnan Venkata. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. Pleasure.
So you're the Chief Client Officer at LatentView Analytics. Can you tell us, what the day-to-day looks like for you, what LatentView does, and kind of where you came from, how you wound up there?
Sure. We are a premier analytics consulting company that's headquartered in San Jose and also has got offices in Seattle, Chennai, Bangalore, etc. I'm a data analytics professional by job. I've been working in the company for close to 16 years, spent my last 14 years in Seattle. I'm responsible for acquisition of clients, managing our North America business overall, and ensuring that we do a really good job and continue to grow as a company. I've been in the services business for over a couple of decades now. I worked with large companies like Wipro, Cognizant, before joining LatentView, which was a startup. I'm passionate about math, passionate about analytics, and both of them together helps keep me on my toes in my job.
Yeah. Analytics is an interesting space because as much as there's a lot of valuable data, there's a lot of crap out there. So do you find it all when you're talking to new clients that it's difficult to say, no, this is real, like the value we're delivering to you is real. It's not just another chart that will distract you from your core focus.
Yeah, I think it used to be much harder in the last decade when analytics was not mainstream, when we had just set up the firm at that point of time. It's a challenge with people because they have messy data and they say that, we don't even organize our data before, and how do you analyze things when you don't have your data organized? But things I think have improved with cloud and some of those things that have come through. And I would say that today the organizations are investing in analytics, but they still are figuring out how to get better impact and better dollar value for their investments that are there.
Mm-hmm. When you started your professional career, did you know that it was going to be something math-based or data focused, or did you kind of fall into it?
When I started my services career, I would say I was more in the technology services domain, managing applications and doing services around that. I used to be a part-time math teacher, so that's been a passion for mine for some time. And so when I had the opportunity, when I was between jobs, then I did look at this and I got this opportunity. I was interested in getting into this because of the math and stat linkage to this. And that's why I did take a job finally in the analytics space. And it was just gathering steam in the year 2008 when I joined. And I must say that it was something that I enjoyed doing, and I'm happy to have taken the plunge.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space. I have to ask, just because you're a math teacher background and now managing major clients on the analytics side, who makes a better student, a proper student or a client?
I would say that a proper student for sure, because at least he knows the role is to learn. I'm not sure clients would be very appreciative of me professing to them about what they should be doing. Yeah.
True, but helping them understand numbers. I found I come from the marketing side of things, and half the battle is helping people understand the data before you tell them what it means. Because you can't say it's doing well. You have to be like, here are the numbers. Here's what they mean. Here's how they're tracked. That's why it means they're doing well. And some clients don't want to learn half the battle. That's why companies like you do so well. All right. Well, thank you so much for the background. I think without further ado, we're going to reveal our bad idea. Then you and I will do our best to beat it up for a couple minutes. Sure. And if we're feeling bold, we'll try to flip the script and turn it into something good. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Let's see what we got. So today, our bad idea is a data dump decision maker, a business analytics tool that randomly selects data points to help executives make critical decisions, ignoring statistical significance and context.
Sometimes it's quite true. This is how things are happening. But I remember a lot of people have come with examples, but I remember one of these examples when I was learning correlation and causation a long time back. I heard about drinking beer making you more religious, right? And people were like, "Oh, that's fascinating. That if you drink more beer," and then when we started looking into the layers of why that's happening, and it was true, which is there were more beer drinkers in the city, and there were more people who are going, or more churches, or more people who are going to churches as well in that city. And so, yeah, it did make sense that drinking beer makes you more religious. But the reality was, it's not that it's this one. These are two correlated events because the population of that city has generally increased. So that's the classic use case of just taking random data and just correlating it and saying, come up with an executive decision. It's unreal. And I just keep thinking about this example every time I hear about the just taking some data dump and just coming up with an analysis, and then you basically just present this insight and you're like, oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. We used to, so it was my startup past, when we'd run an experiment that would totally flop, we'd go on this hunt to find some valuable learning, which basically meant like whittling down the data set till it was small enough to show an uptick, which is basically just going on a wild goose chase for some sort of positive indicator. I'll say as that was random, like our bad idea, basically like pulling metrics out to point to positivity in the midst of negativity. The process helped us learn a ton about how the business actually did work, because seeing all those different layers ultimately revealed the data set that we used to really drive growth. But the process was random. We were just looking for a positive proof point to be like, I know we spent all this money and it didn't work, but this is going up.
It's interesting because in one of the first assignments that I did, we had a case in which we had to present that if the client invested X million dollars, what is the lift that the person will have on a certain metric? And so I had basically looked at the data. We had looked at spend at a very fairly granular level, and we came out that no amount of marketing spend is actually going to lift that metric. And that was the reality of what the data showed. So I told that this is what the data is showing, and this is the reality that it's not going to lift. Obviously, the person who's then going to report it to the CMO says, no matter what you're going to invest, you're not going to lift in the metric. And they said, hey, I need to get a lift in metric as a objective. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the dollars. So then when I approached the client, they said, you know what? Why don't you speak to this person who's a leader? He has come up with a different approach to this whole thing. I said, what's the different approach? I mean, this is fairly straightforward in terms of identifying that it was not there. And what he had done was he had rolled up the data in such a way that there were only 4 data points. And he extrapolated with the 4 data points and said that there could be a 10% lift. And I said, yeah, but 4 data points is not enough. And I think one of the benchmarks we use is at least we need 30 data points. And we said, no, but this is all the data that you have, so use that. And so we created that, and we said, okay, there'll be a 10% point thing. I said, okay, this guy is a leader. This is the client. They're fairly this one. So I said, you know what? We'll publish that. They actually did spend all that money, and the metric never lifted. So unfortunately, I was right the first time, but I was wrong in what I actually published, which is kind of thing. So you can, and we at LatentView sometimes say this, that you can torture data till it confesses. So, I mean, you can, and we realize that we used to do it saying that you need to look at it from a lot of angles, but it can actually also have that if you massage the data if you don't do it the right way and you keep looking at the data in different angles, you can tell the story that you want to tell. So that's the other, that's the flip side of data analytics if you don't use it the right way.
Yeah. I think, it's an interesting time, right? Because we went through over the last 3 years, like from, 10, 15 years ago where analytics weren't like front and center for everybody to 2020, 2021, where we're all looking at like a COVID case chart every day. It's just a very interesting time. Granted, I don't have the experience you do, but marketer at a startup, I was looking at charts all day, every day too, and trying to influence the charts. And it was fascinating to me to watch like how much money and how much energy was poured into influencing, those outcomes, without any like clear retroactive. I mean, because at least at the startup, you spend a lot of money. You have to do a post-mortem and be like, okay, what did we achieve? Where are things going? What do we do next? And, we were watching this evolve over months and eventually years without seeing any of that. Okay, what did this do? What did that do? How do we change? How do we pivot? What layers are we actually looking at? Like there wasn't ever really that open conversation. And there was a lot of data torturing going on too. So just it was a really interesting time.
True.
A positive outcome though, I think the world is more familiar with seeing charts like this.
Yeah.
So my hope is one of the indirectly positive outcomes will be, regardless of what we're measuring, especially if it's something that could be, deadly or catastrophic, we're more equipped as a global population to look at it and hold the people making decisions a little more accountable for where it's going to go.
No, I think at the end of the day, if you think about it, you're starting to look at the data without taking gut-based decisions, right? I had been to the office of a leading telecommunications provider, and I had asked them, how do you look at identifying what kind of phones you need to keep in your range, right? So there were certain phones that they used to back as part of their plans, and they said that it's typically the war room that they have, the leadership war room, where they all fight with their own perspectives on what it should be, and they come up with a decision around it. And I was very fascinated that yes, they did have the data of past device performance, etc., but anytime they looked at it, it was not very objective, but very subjective and very emotionally driven decisions around this. And I thought to myself that seems not like a very scientific way to go about this, right? And so in that case, I would say that even if you're taking some random data and at least presenting it, at least you're much better than saying, I'm absolutely going to use no data, but using my gut.
Yeah.
So maybe in that case, that does work. But in this case, we actually came up with a very interesting thing that now you have access to so much data outside that there is a lot of chatter that can happen around the phones before their launch. And we were able to correlate that the pre-chatter on cell phones is a good indicator of what the sales will be. In fact, box office movies, they use that a lot. They used to say, let's influence chatter prior to the movies so that you can ensure that you get a good opening on the box office, right? And which is why they say any news sells, whether it's good news or bad news. You'll see a lot of these controversies surfacing, etc. And that's around that period when there needs to be chatter around the movie and around the actors, etc. And that helps a lot in this. And the same thing applies for telephones as well in terms of this. So what we have realized, be it album sales, be it movie sales, be it this, there is now data available, right? And it's up to folks to actually use that and do it, and try to not look at it as just take some random data and do some analysis. I don't think that's necessarily a good approach to it, but at least start looking at data and thinking about it at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the positive outcome is that at least people are looking at data instead of fighting for their idea.
Yeah, that's true.
But the negative outcome is that if you're just randomly looking at data, and you're changing that data, the next time you come back to do a periodic review, you're looking at totally different data or different data points. You're kind of invalidating all the work you did. So you're restarting at zero every single time.
Yeah. No, I think that's also, it is important to think about it from the perspective that if you look at the wrong data and if you look at the wrong inferences because of the wrong data, you could be making dangerous decisions around data as well, right? And that's not very smart. We have had multiple cases where we have had that and we have got it in reviews in terms of saying that we are using the variables that should not be used because they are actually the outcome variable in itself, right? And those kind of things are extremely important. So it's important to use the proper data in the proper context, and to make sure that you are not biasing your decision based on that. And the bias in decisions or the bias in using the data and the analytics method is a very high issue in the industry. You've got to be careful about it. Yeah.
How can it be corrected? I mean, it's one of those things where you're not going to share your company's data externally, so nobody but you and your board is going to know. And if your board doesn't have time, which no one does, to actually dig into the underlying information and see what you're looking at and
Yeah.
what you're hiding, like how do we get to a place where there's like data integrity?
There are, to be fair, some of the organization invest a lot into governance, quality systems, and review boards, and you absolutely need to do that with data as well as the models. It just goes without saying that that needs to be done. Else,
Yeah.
you are. It's like this. It's little knowledge could be more dangerous, and maybe I think if you look at it, saying that if you're going to use data or misuse data or use the wrong kind of data, might as well not use the data and use your gut instinct and take a decision. Yeah, so maybe kind of contrary to the job that I have is I would say don't go with the data, go with your gut. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever, speaking of gut, do you ever run into situations with clients where you start getting set up, you start learning like their new clients' information, and you present something that runs contrary to the stakeholders, gut or instinct, where the numbers show that something else is happening or something different is happening?
Yeah. So I think yes, the answer is yes. We do have cases in which we would go contrary to this. But I've been fortunate, I would say, that clients have been receptive and supportive of having that conversation with you. But you have to make sure that you are absolutely getting
Sure.
it right. You're absolutely sure about this. You can't get that wrong. If you're questioning the decision, you can't be wrong on that. And so you make sure that you lay down your assumptions, lay down what you're thinking and why you've come up with that. So going through that process is important rather than telling them that they have a problem in how they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's a risky road to take. But there are a lot of benefits to taking that road. Is if you are able to display that you are there, the client now understands that you're a person who has a thought process and a point of view that is important, and you have helped them not make a wrong decision, and that's very powerful. And a lot of times I tell my teams that we need to not be an execution partner in analytics, but a thought partner. So once you become a thought partner, which is where you are actually working and they are actually relying on you to drive their decisions, then as a company that provides analytics services, that's half your job done, or even 90% of your job done, because then they are going to use your analytics and they are going to use this. Otherwise, if they look at it with a skeptical eye, you may do all the analytics and they don't use it. It doesn't serve.
Doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. You're bringing up. I don't want to go into too big of a rabbit hole, but you brought up, perspective and point of view, and not running contrary to the client's point of view. But I think point of view, at least from my meager perspective, point of view is probably the most valuable context in any data. And what I mean by that is, you're exposed to 30 data points, you just said, to make a decision. Most of the business leaders I work with are fully up to speed on 5 or 6 within their organization. And that scales up to, $100 million plus businesses. I know your target's a little bigger, but even still, leaders can't keep all that information in their head, whereas you guys are able to regularly process 30, 50, 100. Yeah. So half the battle is helping them understand how the influence works. And I think for the space as a whole, right, that's the education target, and that's where governance and quality come into play, right?
No, I think that's a very important part, which is people can only, or the human brain can do it very quickly on 2 to 3 dimensions very quickly. So you can say, my daughter would like a pink doll. My son would like a tennis racket. It's a very simple thing. But once you want to say that boys with a certain age group, which are just going through this and who study in a certain zip code, etc., now you've started coming through a lot of segments. And you're making more nuanced decision, which is then where you require your computers to do it. It's the same thing that you're doing. You're just extrapolating the number of dimensions. So human brain is very good to do 1 or 2 dimensions very quickly. They're very good with it, but then you get the sub segments. But if you want to go multiple segments down, you need to look at analytics for sure.
Yeah. And helping someone understand how all those different measures, contribute. It's like explaining an orchestra to somebody. Like they see the instruments, but maybe don't necessarily understand the role that they play.
That's a good way to say that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I feel like the math is layered that way. All right.
I'm going to use that.
Hey, you've got the platform for it. That's why we begged you to come on. So back to this. So data dump decision maker. So we think it's a bad idea because it could lead you into bad decision making. Like if you're using random data, to quote you, like going with your gut might be just as good, just as bad, but at least it's your gut. You're not betting on some random numbers. But the positive we identified is by generating random information, we're forcing you to look at your information through a new perspective. And I think that is where the nugget of good idea kind of lies here. Because we're talking about point of view, we're talking about, 2 points versus 30 points.
Yeah.
Is there a universe where some kind of like random perspective generator or like app or analytics service that just spins your data from a different angle helps you become aware of how some of these other measures influence them? Because there's value in something like that?
In fact, I know that one of the modeling techniques used to be called the kitchen sink modeling technique, which means throw all the data at the model and let it choose, right? So, there is a data dump. It is scientific. It is not necessarily, we call it unsupervised learning, which is what it's data dump, right? You are asking the models to choose their own techniques, etc., by not supervising them. Now, the way to think about it is you just cannot blindly take the decision coming out of that. The only point is the data decision maker is what we call the first version, and we call that the baseline. So use that to come up with your baseline, then analyze what did the model pick and why did it pick it, right? And why did the model take that choice? Or so if you say, like we find that the drinking beer makes you more religious, try to understand why is that happening. Is there an underlying parameter that was there that influenced that? And then you would come to some of those answers. So I think the data dump decision maker is actually a powerful starting tool in a lot of cases when you don't use anything at all. So you have your gut any which ways. Then you use the data dump decision maker to get the first level of this. Then say that, you know what, let's try to understand if this made sense or this is completely random. And even that you learn something that, okay, if this is starting to make sense, you may, in 10% of the cases, may actually stumble upon something that is actually pretty powerful. And so sometimes it allows some freedom of expression for saying, yeah, I don't know whether that is useful, but let's just throw it into the model and see whether it works. So, if you are putting the right data processes and AI process on top of this thing, this could be a very interesting and innovative approach to at least start your journey in analytics for sure.
Yeah. Or what do you think about as like a growth product? Or maybe a customer isn't ready for a full service or to engage as a full client, but you say, look, I've got this free tool I'll send to you. You can dump whatever information in you want. And what it's going to do is periodically generate perspectives for you. And if you ever have questions or shows you something interesting, give me a call and, I'll hop on the phone and help you kind of think through it. But like just kind of like a seeder to get people into the process of looking at numbers, to start a conversation with a company like yours.
Yeah, you could actually have that. I think there have been certain platforms that are there, but yeah, absolutely, we can give them saying that if all you're looking to see is how do you want to quickly chart and quickly correlate and find out the top things that are driving it, do it. But before using it, ping us, right? In terms of at least learn it, understand it. If you're not able to understand it, we'll help you understand that. And then I think that's could be a powerful catalyst to having an initial conversation or initial adoption for sure.
Yeah. Have you ever done any work with Mixpanel, the analytics tool?
We have, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a big Adobe Analytics guy. That's kind of like my dream suite. And I think Mixpanel is not Adobe, but it's kind of like a startup version of the same type of layering and segmenting that Adobe does, maybe one less variable. But the big difference in the services is that Adobe gets on the phone with you and walks through your entire buyer journey and helps you understand what you can measure and shows you examples of how you can look at those things. Whereas Mix, I think, just gives you the tool and says, good luck. Try to figure it out. And that's where something like this, like if Mix just had an add-on that randomly made reports based on the data it was receiving, maybe usage would be more on par with what Adobe achieved.
No, I think that's actually an interesting thing that you bring up, because that actually works for us who are familiar with analytics a lot. When you have something like mixed panel, where we actually did some of it to actually start looking at a lot of the web data. The sunburst charts that are there were very powerful in terms of showing navigational, how people are navigating through their websites, etc. So which segments of users are navigating, how do they change, etc. I think it's a really nice platform. It's a neat platform. Adobe Analytics is a fantastic product as well. We've used it extensively with a lot of our clients, and its maturity makes a lot of sense as well. But yeah, I do think that it's a great starting point for having something which is simple, which you can throw in a bit of data and start seeing some results. Is a good way to start getting more of it to be used. And I think that's a very interesting way to do this.
Yeah. It's funny because, on its face, this is a really bad idea. Like a decision maker that's just based on a data dump is totally random. But I think we keep coming back to this core problem that, companies don't really know where to start in some cases. And like that's the real problem to be solved in this space. If you can get them to start, then they'll learn, and there are companies like yours that can kind of help facilitate that learning and handhold them through the space. But I think that's going to be, especially with all this AI stuff that's going on, there's just going to be so much more data. It's about time our ability to process and interpret catches up, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's a great point, right? Which is, when used in the right way, the data dump decision maker is an interesting enough catalyst to at least start the analysis journey, right? While it sounds like taking random data and taking decisions is very dangerous, but it's interesting that if used in the right way, it can at least get the right direction in terms of starting to look at data, right? When you're not looking at any data, it's now allowing you to start looking at data, and then that helps with the maturity curve sometimes. Yeah.
This is super fascinating. I think this is a hard one to dig into without putting people to sleep because it's so deep. But I think we highlighted a major point that's really hard for anyone else to write about. So I'm hoping the right people see this. If folks want to learn from you or hear you speak, or convince you to take them on as a client, how do they connect with you?
You could reach me at my email, which is krishnan.venkata@latentview.com. I'm available on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Krishnan Venkata. So please reach out to me. Happy to connect with people and happy to learn more and happy to even discuss more in terms of how data can be helped in their decision making.
Yeah, and I'd imagine you're probably on panels and speaking at conferences fairly frequently. Anything big coming up that you'd want people to take a look at?
We are actually at the International Myeloma Foundation on April 18th. This is actually a Data for Good initiative. This is in New York, where I'm not speaking at it, but LatentView is being accorded the Partner of the Year for partnering with them on their journey. We've also been a finalist of the year at the Microsoft Supplier Conference. So among the thousands of suppliers that they have, we were the top 5 finalists that were chosen. But I do speak in a lot of the analytics conferences, or if not, at least attend quite a few of them. The more recent ones, I think, will be the things like Shop Talk, Analytics Unite, etc. Those will be the ones that I'll be there. I've not charted out my calendar yet, but I'm sure that there'll be a few of them that my team will be getting me to sign up for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they need to. You're brilliant. I think we'll try to push this one out in the next week or so if the 18th is a big award for you guys. Thank you so much for coming on and beating this one up with us. I think this is a lot of fun. I learned a ton from you. I'm grateful to have a few minutes with you.
No, thank you, Nick. Thanks for reaching out. And I really like the concept, like the way we ran this, and look forward to many more sessions, and all the best. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.